New year. 2 weeks of the NFL left. We've already had 4 games this week. Kind of a game last night, I guess. But for those of you that have the proud, that have made it to the end, to the championship, we got to push you over the top. And our guy is joining us right now from CBS Sports. Good morning, Dave Richard. How are you?
What's up, Jason? I hope you are doing well in your fantasy championships. Hopefully you haven't run into Lamar Jackson or Derrick Henry or the Seahawks DST. Wow, what a game last night. A gutter ball, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean,
hopefully you didn't start, somebody in that game like JSN or Caleb Williams. I like those guys so much. Zach Charbonnet. I loved Zach Charbonnet in that matchup, but just really a gross game on a short week. And there's been all 3 of the games so far in week 17 have been short week games, and they've been gross. The teams that we know, like they're well coached, and certainly the players who've been there a long time, the Chiefs, the Ravens, those teams did well, but all the other teams really stunk it up. And I think that's a testament to the short week not being beneficial for teams with new coaches, new offenses, struggling injuries that have taken a toll. That's the case of Houston. Maybe I'm just making up excuses, but really it's a bad product and a bad look for the NFL.
Yeah.
Games on a short week be so non-competitive / not exciting.
Yet I know the players hate it. Coaches probably hate it too. And then there's record numbers on Netflix, and I'm sure there were good numbers last night on Amazon. The league's still killing it, which is probably bad for the rest of us in that sense.
Right. Very true.
Yeah, they're not going to change that. Now, one of the things you have said, I'm a proponent of it too, Dave, and I fell for it myself. I'll do a quick story here. Is one of the leagues you said, hopefully you're doing well. I didn't follow my own league rules. I had no idea. This was one that was set up by one of our work employees. It was a fun little work league. And I was in what I thought was the semifinals 2 weeks ago, and I had a couple guys left on the Monday night. I was really close and ended up being like a point short. I'm like, man. Oh, well, next year. I wasn't too worried about it. Then I go into last week, and I still see the point totals in this matchup again. I went, wait, it's a 2-week playoff. I had never seen that before. And I was still live, won last week, and I'm in the championship in a 2-week playoff again this week. You see a lot of those 2 weeks at the end, head-to-head things?
Not really. I know a couple of leagues that used to do it. I used to be in one that did that, and really it was just a way to squeeze out just as much fantasy football as you could and make every week of the season. There are some leagues that start their championship weeks now, and they continue it through week 18. But really, the last week of the NFL season has become such an albatross because so many teams have a good reason to rest their players. They won't put them out there. What I'm hearing from you is that your championship started in week 16 and goes into week 17. I guess that's fun, and it definitely extends. Obviously, it gives you a chance to win the league now. But I don't really hear of that very much. I also don't hear of a lot of leagues that have their championship start and end in week 16. They want to make sure that there's enough fantasy to go around for everybody, so they push it so that the championship is in week 17. That's usually what I see in here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, for those that are still alive, that are trying to get over the finish line this week, how can you help it? Maybe there's a player they obviously got there. They've built their roster. They've done the right things. But is there a player or two this week that still has yet to play that you're like, hey, look, sneak this player in. This might be able to help you.
So there are little things that you can do. Like there's question marks about the Chargers backfield and the Giants backfield. If you wanted to go and pick up, and listen, this is going to sound gross, but maybe you're struggling at running back. Maybe Devin Singletary is on your waiver wire or Kamani Vidal is on your waiver wire. Those 2 guys might play and might have a big role for their respective offenses in what are not bad matchups for both of them. Or they can end up being wastes of space on your fantasy team because the starters in front of them are going to play, and then they're the ones that are going to get the points. In the case of the Chargers, we know that Gus Edwards is out. J.K. Dobbins might be back. He might be playing. He was limited in practice for 2/3 of the week. We'll find out on Saturday. That's the early game on Saturday is the Chargers and the Patriots. If Dobbins is activated and good to go, then Kamani Vidal shouldn't be on any redraft league rosters. Same thing with the Colts. They play, though, on Sunday. Tyrone Tracy, we'll see if he does. If Tyrone Tracy doesn't practice on Friday, we might get the word by Friday on whether or not Devin Singletary is the guy. So Singletary is somebody that you can go and grab. Maybe you end up using him as your running back if you're desperate. But if your opponent is desperate for a running back, or if your opponent has Tyrone Tracy, then do what you got to do. Stash Devin Singletary. And then if Tracy ends up playing, you just cut Devin Singletary, you pick up somebody else. Maybe you pick up a good luck charm like Chris Godwin to carry on your bench for some good karma. Receivers that you can pick up this week and might help you. Jalen McMillan is at the top of the list. He's still out there in about half of CBS Sports leagues. He's the new number 2 receiver in Tampa Bay. They take on Carolina. That's a really good matchup. Brandon Cooks figures to be the new number 1 receiver for the Cowboys. Very tough matchup against Philadelphia, but it's one where I think the Cowboys will be trailing. So there is an opportunity for maybe 7 or 8 targets for Brandon Cooks. That makes him an interesting play. Jalen Coker, Kayshon Boutte, kind of desperation plays there. At tight end, Chigo Okonkwo has become a top target getter for the Tennessee Titans. And I wonder if he could end up being – he hasn't gotten a touchdown in the last 2 weeks. I don't think he's even had a red zone target, Jason. But I do think he's going to continue to see decent target volume from the Titans. And as long as the Titans can't run the ball, they're playing Jacksonville. They should be able to run the ball. But if they can't, Okonkwo is going to end up being a really good fantasy option. Let's end it with the DSTs. Dolphins still out there in a decent chunk of leagues. They take on the Browns. Browns offense is terrible. Dolphins should be able to hold them back. The Raiders DST. They've got this. Hey, look, the Saints offense looked terrible on Monday. We all saw it. Kind of a short week for them to bounce back and regroup. They might get Chris Olave back. They might get Marquez Valdez-Scantling back. Maybe that helps them. This is going to sound crazy, Jason. They might score a touchdown, the Saints. All right. But the Raiders defense has actually been playing well the past few weeks. I don't mind them if you're really stuck, but I would obviously start the Dolphins DST. I would take the chance on the Rams DST. And it's supposed to be rainy in Washington, so maybe the Commanders, Falcons, both of those DSTs make sense. The Commanders more so because they're taking on Michael Penix in his second start. They're all in the same range as the Raiders, but the Dolphins and the Rams would be ahead.
Dave, let's see. Where's it here? G Money says he's playing for first, so he needs help here. Mooney or Thielen at wide receiver?
Well, Thielen showed up on the injury report on Thursday, limited with an issue. If he doesn't practice on Friday, I would be prepared to start Mooney. If he does practice on Friday, it's absolutely Adam Thielen.
Okay. And I think the way the standings are going, the Chiefs finally clinched the 1 seed, but they already played their game this week. And if most leagues are wrapped up this week, you're probably okay with that. Is there anybody that's, Buffalo, are they fully, they're going to play everybody? Is everybody kind of playing everybody that should be?
So there are a couple of spots where the results don't matter, like the Lions and the Vikings. If they lose, they can still get the 1 seed. They play each other in week 18. But the coaches are talking like they're going to play to win their games and not rest their guys. The only way that they would rest, Goff or Darnold, for example, is if the game is a blowout one way or the other. And I just don't expect that to happen, especially in that game between the Vikings and Packers. I keep getting the feeling that that's going to be a high-scoring game, and I'm going to want to start players from both of those teams.
Who's your fantasy MVP this year?
That's a good question. Usually the fantasy MVP isn't somebody that's taken in the first round and performs to expectations. Like you would say that Jamar Chase could be the fantasy MVP, but he was a first round pick. He did what he was supposed to do. I think Joe Burrow qualifies as someone who could be a fantasy MVP because he was drafted significantly past round 1, maybe a top 5 quarterback. And look at what he's done this year. Just huge fantasy numbers. I'll go with him. No, I'm not going to go with him. I'm taking that back immediately because I thought of somebody who was drafted even later than Joe Burrow, who's been as good, if not better than Joe Burrow, and that's Jaden Daniels on the Washington Commanders. And we can call him the fantasy rookie of the year. That's easy to say, but he's also probably the fantasy MVP because we're talking about him. I remember telling Dave, this is a round 9, round 10 guy that you can target, but other people are going to target him as well. Get him to be on your bench. He'll eventually be your fantasy starter. Man, when he wasn't hurt, Jason, he was masterful, and last week was a really good example of that. And if the weather is nice, if it ends up, the forecast is rain in Washington, but if the weather's nice, there's no rain, no issues, he's going to have another big week.
Are any of you, I can't remember, Dave, if any of the leagues you play in, are you in any keeper leagues?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I'm not a fantasy nerd for nothing, Jason. Of course I'm in a keeper league.
Do you have a thought? Obviously, if anybody had a great year, you keep it, but if you're debating between a running back, quarterback, receiver, is there any way you lean on your keepers?
No, it's a case-by-case basis. And the problem with keeper leagues, there's no uniform way that they're built. Some keeper leagues, you can only keep one guy and you don't lose a draft pick. Some keeper leagues, you can keep 3 guys, but you lose a draft pick, and the draft pick changes from league to league. And some leagues are dynasty leagues where you keep everybody and you still get some rookie draft picks. So I don't really say that there's like some sort of hierarchy between the positions. Generally speaking, if you're in a league where running backs are hard to come by, you're going to lean toward keeping running backs over wide receivers. But I'm going to tell you this, when I'm done talking to you, I'm going to go on YouTube and I'm going to drop a whole list of players that are for people in keeper leagues to go and stash. If you go to YouTube, search for Fantasy Football Today, and it'll be live at, 7:30 your time, but it'll also be available after this interview for the rest of eternity for you to go and look at players that you can add now who could be possible keepers for your fantasy team before next season.
I'm guessing, I think you said this earlier, even when we knew officially that CMC would be done for the year. If you have a guy like him, which I do in my keeper league, and he's who I'm planning on keeping, he's worth it in this case, would you say?
I don't know what it'll cost you to keep Christian McCaffrey next year, but assuming that he's healthy for next year and doesn't have a random injury right before the season that's going to sideline him for 10 weeks and make everybody miserable, he's probably a good keeper. I still expect him to be Christian McCaffrey next year, but I also expect the 49ers to really take good care of him all off season and maybe not overwork him, maybe not at all next year, but certainly not until like the late games when they're trying to be competitive, if the 49ers are competitive next year.
So, Dave, last question for you. I know you watch all this kind of the fantasy angle, but it still works. Just your opinion. You watch all these teams. Yeah. Who would you pick now, today, to win this whole thing? Who will win the Super Bowl, you think?
I'm going to take Baltimore. I think that they're peaking on defense, and on offense, they've been great all season long. They're a team that really hasn't been ravaged by injuries yet either. Kansas City's played in way too many close games. They've had some injuries that have slowed them down, and the receivers that they've added over the past couple of weeks, I don't know if they're going to be necessarily impactful when push comes to shove against really good defenses. In Buffalo, man, I really want to see Josh Allen make the Super Bowl. I want the Bills to experience a Super Bowl win. Look at how close they were way back in the Jim Kelly era, and Josh Allen deserves to go to a Super Bowl. But that defense is starting to fall apart a little bit, and it makes me nervous that they won't hold up their end of the bargain. And Josh Allen will play Superman, and he might just fall short, especially against a team like Baltimore.
So Ravens, who they meeting? Maybe the Lions or Eagles? Or
I think the Eagles are the team. Lions defense, that's another team that's falling apart defensively. The only way that the Lions are beating people now is by outscoring them. And Philadelphia's defense, they really peaked more so after their bye. But I don't think they've really fallen off of that peak just yet. They've had a couple of games where it's been rough for them, but I do think that they will end up bringing out the best that they can play on defense, and that'll be better than what Minnesota and Detroit will be. I don't know what it is about Detroit in my mind, Jason, but they're third for me. I think Minnesota ends up beating them next week. I think Minnesota wins the division, and Minnesota just stays ahead of Detroit, and Detroit maybe doesn't sniff the Super Bowl. I kind of hope I'm wrong, because that's another fan base that I'd love to see go and participate in the Super Bowl and play and maybe even win it. It would be so fun for them. But I just don't think they've got the defense for it anymore.
Well, it'll be fun to watch. We appreciate your insight, Dave, all year long. Really, our listeners have enjoyed that as well. And enjoy the postseason and your off season, which really never ends for you. And we encourage everybody to watch your show live in about 15 minutes, you said?
We'll be on 15 minutes to talk about keepers. We'll go through some start-sit decisions for week 17 as well, but we just got done recording our latest start and sit episode. You know, we do that every single week on our channel. It's a 2-part episode. We do one on Thursday, one on Friday, go way in depth to help people. And if you're in a fantasy championship, do not go into Saturday's games without watching what we have to say. Go to youtube.com, search for Fantasy Football Today, and like and subscribe to the CBS Sports Fantasy Football Today channel on YouTube.
Awesome. Dave, thank you as always, and look forward to talking to you again next season.
Looking forward to it as well, Jason. Good luck in your league.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. That is Dave Richard. Always incredible insight. Check out all of his material, and he's helped you hopefully get to this point in your fantasy football season. All right, we got much more to get to, much more back on the Kings and the